What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Today in Esports on the Global Gaming Network channel, where we get the opportunity to go over everything that is happening across the globe in esports. What's happening in Major 2 for Call of Duty, plenty of that to dive into as we have the Major in Allen, Texas happening very, very soon. We also have First Stand in their first phase and what that is looking like in Seoul, South Korea. As always, the ESL Pro League for Counter-Strike is always ripping on. We have all of that and some more. My name is Andy. Joined with me as always is Chris. How you doing after this past weekend, Chris?
I'm great. As you said, there's a lot to take a look at, and I'm ready to start diving into it.
Well, without further ado, then let's jump right on into everything that happened this past weekend, starting off with some Call of Duty. We had ourselves a good old rematch for the grand finals that happened in the Minor 2 tournament this past weekend for our very first matchup on Friday, and that's immediately where we're going to be taking a focus on the Vancouver Surge taking on the LA Thieves. Of course, we didn't have a best of 7 for these two, but a best of 5 might as well be where we can see these two in stacking up against one another. We knew one of 3 things was going to be happening. That the series was going to be close, the Surge was going to continue to get better, and that the Thieves were going to continue to enact their Super Team Feel post-Major 1 Grand Finals loss to Atlanta. We got at least 2, guaranteed if not all 3. This felt more like Surge were trying to strengthen their map pool rather than the Thieves with how the vetoes went down. It makes sense with Neptune still being freshly added if you really think about it. Vault Hardpoint, which was still close, Skyline Search and Destroy that went to round 11, and has been Surge's hard veto. The same could be said about the round 5 Vault Control. This was a super competitive 3-0 loss for the Surge that still feels super good, walking away from this as they progress forward, while the Thieves still remain undefeated. Jumping straight into Saturday, we first took a focus of Atlanta Faze taking on the Minnesota Rokkr. Both these two teams looking for a bounce back after what happened in the Minor 2 tournament just this past weekend. And map 1 was a really close one. On Protocol, Atlanta Faze took it 250 to 234, but Minnesota had an excellent start. They started Grandma's side, and they immediately got top trips, which is Faze's side of the map. And they had a really good rotation going in towards P2, but Faze, they immediately got to work at the tail end of P2 and had a really good hold of spawns on P3 and a near unbreakable hold of the scrap going in towards the money hill of P4. But the game remained dead even going in towards the second set, with Estriel leading the way at 16-11 for Minnesota, and Draws is struggling for Faze after getting just about blown out of the water with the first set. But the Tiny Terriers continued on with that. The scrappiness continued on back and forth with the second set of hills, but Faze relentlessly had the spawns for P3 into P4 like a team possessed. Estriel was still fighting hard during all of this, while Faze were amidst their listening. They were decisive, calling out spawn kills and placings, then in dictating the pace down in screens for P4 during the transition from ult. This spelled the end for Rokkr as Atlanta did not relent, soon setting up for the win on P2. Or were they? Rokkr spawned in for P2 effectively and just ran through the initial setup of Faze. Faze hit through P1 where Nero had a nasty hold on the AA gun. This put Faze into a little bit of a spawn trap, and Rokkr won the rotation to New, and it was 241 to 220. Faze find the kills, but Minnesota still had the spawns, and then top trips they hit until Abizi and Simp worked together in the catacombs of P3 side building and broke down Rokkr for the final 9 seconds required. Jumping in towards map 2, Atlanta won 6-2. There was some really good back and forth within the first 2, maybe even 3 rounds following Rocker's incredible retake on the A bomb to end round 1, where it felt like Estriel either saw the 2 Atlanta players run past him and he didn't shoot, or truly was too shift, passing another in the night. The world may never know. Then Faze turned it up 5 straight rounds from them, where the Tiny Terriers were having their way, but most importantly, Simp's 7th spree through 4 rounds, and even more important, round 8. Simp and Abizi went 5-2 for first bloods combined, and Simp and Celecia almost dropped more damage combined than the entire Minnesota Rokkr roster. It was so close until it just simply wasn't. Which set ourselves up for a map 3 protocol control. Atlanta won 3-1 and the series 3-0. Faze won the first round on offense where they captured all 6 segments, It was so brutal from opening all the way to end, even though the opening breakoff didn't really favor one team. They still got 2 segments, did Faze, on their opening push, but they slowly worked Minnesota down, capturing the B zone, and then the last segment required on A, as Abizi took another hostage amidst the play. Round 2 was Faze's defense, where they won immediate breakoff, and then Abizi got into tools, proceeding to put Minnesota into a spawn trap. Rokkr fought back to at least get 2 segments of progress. Rokkr on defense won round 3, where Estriel got straight to business with a force spree to start the round, putting Faze now in the spawn trap of their own. Faze on offense for round 4 is where they called game and series. When Faze got out of a spawn post-opening break, they were barely losing gunfights. At 24-12, Abizi called in a Hellstorm missile, allowing Faze to get more space and drain more clock, as for Sim, find more kills and end the game as well as the series. Which then brought us over towards the Carolina Row Ravens taking on against Cloud9 New York, who have been looking much better as of late, especially in recency in the last weekend, where we still have a lot of questions about where Carolina do stand. The start of this map, one on Skyline Hardpoint, which Carolina did win, was back and forth for at least the first hill. At the end of the Kitchen P3, Carolina had a 60-point lead. Cloud9 was getting run through. Going into P2 the second time, it wasn't any better. Those 30 points that Cloud9 had gotten in the first handful of hills, double it for them and add 100 to it for Carolina, and that was the state of the game. It was clear-cut domination from the Royal Ravens from the end of P1 to the end of the game, and a much better look for the hardpoint out of the Ravens altogether, where Cloud9 looked lost, like the majority of the time until the second half of the game. But by the time the Ravens had about a 100-plus point lead, it was truly theirs to lose. Gwyn went 38-21 with 2 minutes of objective time, with 28 of his kills not traded. Into the map number 2, it was a vault search and destroy. Carolina won this handedly 6-2. Round 2, Mac taught us a little bit more about some pretty interesting wall bangs that day, but there was still plenty of time where Cloud9 were fighting, but all in all, they were allowing too many first bloods to go through. Ravens were always reliant on their search and destroy, even versus the best teams in the current game. It was a tough ask for Cloud9, albeit improving to do well in their next test for the Ravens. Carolina was in the flow state, rechalling everything, fighting with numbers down, and retaking bomb sites with ease, even ending with a 2v3 winning 5 straight to boot. Gwyn had another monster performance, 7-6, where he went 4 for 1 in opening duels. It always feels like we get at least one map in a best-of-5 series out of Sib from Cloud9, where he goes completely AWOL. That was his map number 3. Let me explain a little bit more. It took 5 rounds, but Cloud9 New York fought back. Round 1, Carolina won the initial offense. The opening breakoff was hard fought, and Carolina only got 2 segments on A control zone. It took TJ Halley going all the way through the A zone and players to touch B to break up New York's defense and secure the extra 60 seconds. Carolina and New York were neck and neck down to the B zone, where Carolina got vivid on a split push to the B zone and secured the first segment. Trades on trades until it was a 2v1 and Carolina won in the end. Round 2 was Cloud9's offense, and they responded back in kind. They had an incredible opening breakoff, and since fighting the first 2 picks, never gave up their plan and executed it to a round win ultimately. Round 3, Cloud9 then got us our first defensive round win. The start was very standard offensive stuff out of Carolina, same as New York's round previous, honestly. Right after the first segment was locked in at B, Cloud9 was not missing and trading everything to the end of the round. Round 4 then went over towards the Ravens' favor for a defensive side, where they had made all the adjustments required to win the opening breakoff in the round dominantly. Never let up trips and tools, let alone the spawn trap. Needed for Carolina to secure the round 5 defense via segment lead across the previous 4 rounds, which then led us for Cloud9 on an offense. If they wanted to stay alive in the series, they had to win this round. And much like the first offense out of Cloud9 New York, they methodically worked the map in the early minutes, getting the A zone in further power positions to bottleneck the Ravens in the spawn and take the map 3 in the 5th round to extend the series. Sib went nuclear. 40-28 with 4k plus damage. The closest person to him on his team was a solid 1,000 damage below and well beyond 10 plus kills away. Sometimes you're just feeling it. Which then brought us into map 4, which was the ultimate conclusion of the best of 5 of the series. It was 250 to 211. Carolina Royal Ravens did win. Winnie for the ultimate Winnie. Gwyn was challenging just about, if not everything, and more often than not, winning said gunfights. It was impressive. Going to P1 for the second time, Gwyn was double positive at 22 and 11. Although Gwyn was throwing down, Cloud9 weren't too far behind. Cloud9 kept fighting back. Heavier and heavier until the lead was just about 10 points away, but Carolina locked back in and shut down in the end. Showing their strong fundamentals and phenomenal team shots, they still have more to work on as the Ravens still win 3-1. Which then brings us to Optic Texas versus Miami Heretics. It's just something about these two teams, they always end up fighting against one another, whether it's on LAN or online qualifiers. Both these two teams need this win for Stage 2 qualifiers to even have a chance of making it to the winner bracket for the Allen, Texas LAN. Optic are still 0-9 for the stage for map count, and 0-12 versus teams not named Vegas Falcons post-Major 1 changes. Miami is also in danger of starting the lower bracket, as I said, coming off of the second match loss in a Minor 2 tournament this past weekend. So we start off on a red card hardpoint. Miami were able to win 186 to 175. Yeah, you heard me right. Optic came out absolutely shooting and moving as we have seen the world champs do before, but Rokkr out of Miami was content to fight back. The game never felt like any team really could gain a significant edge, albeit both teams were frying. Even when Dashy and Real for each team were stepping up, there was so much gray time. Gray time essentially means that all of that time was going towards the game clock, so it was slowly being whittled down, and no team was getting that time. That's why the scoreline felt so strained. It looked like a day 1 scrim ultimately, but even towards the end, Miami Heretics were able to take map 1. Map 2 then brought us over towards a search and destroy where Miami were able to win 6-2. It was a time, especially if your name started with the letter R and you played for Miami. Real and Rokkr went for a combined 23-7 in between kills and deaths. Optic had the entire red carpet rolled out for them in KD ratio. Barring any impressive moments, this was the Heretics in full takeover. Map 3, Vault Control, Miami Heretics called game. They won 3-1 in the subsequent series 3-0. Round 1 was Miami's offensive one. They won off of lives. It was a 1v2 in the end. Round 2, Miami won on defense. It was a 1v5 in the end. Round 3, Optic fought back. It was down to time where they were just turtled up in corners. AR for Shotzi, even in an SMG a lot of the times for Kenny, just playing certain corners. You could tell that Optic were trying to slow down the pace. But round 4, Miami won on defense again via lives. All 3 rounds that Miami won here on this map number 3 of Vault Control went down to lives, a 3v7 in the end. There was nothing Optic were going to be able to do. Rokkr was double positive after the first 2 rounds. This young man was shooting. Which brings us on to Sunday, the ever so wanted Burger Bowl, baby, but it's not exactly the outcome a lot of us were expecting. Even some of us, some individuals for the CDL analyst desk were even projecting this could be an opportunity that the Vegas Falcons might be able to win. It was not the case at all, albeit certain points of time they kept things close. I think that more was asking some questions about LAG Gorilla Mates and their status, where they currently stand across the entirety of the league. There's no way to gloss over it. These two teams are the worst in the Call of Duty League as it currently stands. Falcons, with this loss, now move to an impressive hardpoint loss streak and an even more worrisome series loss streak. These are both, if already, threatening franchise league and potential Call of Duty history fully. LAG Gorilla Mates need to figure it out, plainly spoken. With the backing of one of the biggest fan bases in the scene besides Optic, you'd expect a team with the world champs of an impeccable coaching lineup as well could get it together. The win and convincing look on map 3 Hacienda is a step in the right direction for the Gorilla Mates. As for Vegas, Exit is really the only one consistently shooting and actively looking for gunfights. King is there from time to time, but this team just doesn't understand hardpoint fully, which makes it even more concerning looking at the 250 to 250 score line at the end of the Skyline map 1. They are learning. I've been saying they are fundamentally sound even when they first appeared in the scene during EU Challengers Elite runs, but there needs to be answers for how impressive these loss streaks are. Which then brings us over to Toronto Ultra versus Optic Texas. Last time these two teams faced was during the Minor 2 tournament last weekend. It was a 3-0 for Toronto, and it would be a 3-0 here again. It was the Skyline Hardpoint last weekend, 250-124, round 11 Surge, and a round 5 Control. None of those maps got played in this series, though. Hardpoint, competitive, Search and Destroy, not even. The Control, even worse. Optic just look lost on the map here, man. They can certainly shoot and move, but watching their gameplay makes me feel like they don't know where to look, hold, or push collectively, and Toronto took full advantage of that here. Many are calling for something to change immediately, if not the moment Major 2 is over. Optic Texas are guaranteed to start in the lower bracket of their home major in Allen, Texas in a few weeks' time. As it currently stands, LA Thieves are the only undefeated team left in the Major 2 qualifiers. Essentially, you want to be top 8 or better within the standings for the stage during qualifiers to start in the winner's bracket once we get to Allen, Texas for Major 2. Plenty of teams on the bubble, and realistically, being on the bubble, you have a few more matches to go this upcoming weekend. LAG with 1 win, Optic and Falcons 0-6, 0-5 respectively. They are guaranteed to start in the lower bracket. The last weekend of qualifiers before Major 2 that is happening in Allen, Texas is happening this upcoming weekend. So make sure you tune in on Thursday so we can tell you what matches we're taking a keen focus on.
Thank you, Andy, for that update on Call of Duty. But let's take a switch on to League of Legends and take a look at what's happening for First Stand in this upcoming week. First Stand has kicked off its inaugural tournament for this year. Riot has introduced it, so it will be the third international tournament, but the first of the 2025 season. Again, we'll take a run over of what is happening in First Stand and what key matches to look up in this upcoming week. First, we'll take a look at the phases. First Stand is split into 2 phases, the first stage being a round robin where each team will face off against each other one time to see where they will see going into the second phase, which will be a bracket stage for them. Again, it will be a best of 3 in this group stage, leading to a best of 5 in the bracket stage. Both stages will continue with the Fearless draft. Another big change for the First Stand tournament will be patch 25.5 introduced. Why is this big? It's because a change to the lane swapping mechanic, which saw a lot of play in the preseason leading up to the First Stand tournament, has been introduced. This will mean that the meta may shift depending on if these changes fairly impact the teams going into the phase number 1. So we'll have to see if that makes any changes and let us know if you like these changes or not. First Stand is also introducing a new UI element to its viewing platforms. We'll have to take a look at that as it impacts the new games coming up for the viewer experience. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the key matchups coming into this week. On Monday, we have Carmine Corps facing off against Team Liquid, EU versus NA. Why is this match important? It is because both of these teams coming into it could be determined on if they place 3rd or 4th moving into that playoff bracket, or if possibly they move down into that 5th. China and Korea are expected to get the number 1 and 2 seeds going into the playoff stage, so these big matchups between these other regions will have a lot of determining factor on who makes it to that playoff stage, as well as what their seeds will be going into it as well. Taking a look at to Tuesday, we will again see Carmine Corps facing off against CFO. Again, as we talked about, Carmine Corps, depending on whether they lose or win against Team Liquid, this could be a big win or a must win for them as well going into it. If they lose against Team Liquid, they will need to win this to keep their playoff hopes alive, or if they do win against Team Liquid, then beating CFO will help them get a higher seed ranking going into that bracket stage as well. Looking at Wednesday's match, we will have Carmine Corps versus TES. Why is this important? Is because, again, since the tournament is being played in Seoul, South Korea, we do have HLE being the favorites, not only being the highest power ranking at 3rd in the world right now, but as well having that home field advantage at LOL Park. So again, if KC is going to be either one of those 2 teams, it most likely will be TES. On Thursday, we do have CFO versus Team Liquid. Much like on the match on Tuesday, if Team Liquid do end up losing to Carmine Corp on Monday, this will be a must-win match for them as well, because the other matches, of course, are against Korea and China, which will be much harder. So for them to make it to that, they'll want to win, of course, against Carmine Corps, but they'll have to beat CFO on Thursday as well. Friday's key matchup will be HLE versus Team Liquid. Depending on Team Liquid's wins or losses going into Friday, it could be a must-win game for them, or it could just be a good game that shows them where they stand against some of the top teams in League of Legends right now. So we'll have to take a look to see how they do leading up to that match against probably the favorites of the First Stand tournament. Join us back on Thursday as we take a look at the matches happening Monday through Wednesday and catch up on those and give you a rundown at what the other games will look like going into Thursday and Friday and how the rankings are stacked up going into the midweek.
As many of you know, ESL Pro League for Counter-Strike 2 is always going on, and that's exactly what happened this past weekend. We have tons of matches to go over, and we've broken them down as best as we possibly could, so stay with us. Let's go over this past weekend of Counter-Strike 2. Starting with our first series, Navi taking on SAW. Let's start with game number 1, with Navi coming out looking exactly what we expected, with Wonderful putting on a clinic. It was clear from the start that Navi were the heavy favorites. In the first half, Navi went on a tear, securing 10 rounds while SAW could only muster up 3. Wonderful was an absolute monster, finishing the first half with a jaw-dropping 12 eliminations and just a single death. Meanwhile, AG1, the standout for SAW, could only manage 5 kills with 3 deaths. It's not nearly enough to hold off Navi. Navi didn't slow down a single bit in the second half either, dropping just 1 round to SAW before wrapping it up in the end to win 13-3. The total kill count, Navi racked up 59 kills, while SAW was only able to get 30. And let's not forget Wonderful, who finished the game with just 3 deaths, an impressive performance in what was on paper a one-sided affair. Game 2, however, was a completely different story. What many expected to be another quick Navi victory turned into a nail-biting slugfest, with SAW making it a real contest. The first half was a back-and-forth affair, with both teams exchanging kills, and the scoreline tied 6 apiece at the break. AG1 stepped up big time in the first half, leading the way for SAW with 10 kills despite having 7 deaths. Meanwhile, JL on Navi struggled, posting just 3 kills and a staggering 9 deaths. The pressure was truly on, and IM on Navi and AG1 on SAW were not ready to give up the fight. Heading into the second half, it was clear that both IM and AG1 were going to carry their teams. While IM posted 11 kills with 6 deaths, it was AG1 who really took charge, leading SAW to a shocking victory. SAW would win the second half 7-3, securing the 13-9 victory in what was one of the biggest upsets of the tournament. SAW's Azuwu and Sejat both dropped 12 kills each in the first half, completely shutting down Navi's attempts to get into the game. By halftime, SAW had already taken a commanding 8-4 lead, having won the last 6 rounds straight. As the team switched sides, Navi were expecting to push back, but instead SAW turned up the heat even more. They won the first 5 rounds of the second half in a dominating fashion, and Navi just couldn't recover. Here's the kicker. Multiple members from Navi that they rely on failed to get a single kill in the second half. It was the complete shutdown by SAW. In the end, SAW won the game 13-4, taking the series 2-1 in a stunning upset.
Next, we have Spirit versus Tyloo. Tyloo would unfortunately draw Team Spirit in the first round for Stage 2. Spirit is arguably the best team currently in ESL. The first map of the series would be Anubis, chosen by Tyloo. This map would be close, but Spirit would win 13-11 with their star player, Doink, dropping 27 kills and only 16 deaths. Spirit picked Nuke for Game 2, which is the map they are most comfortable on. Tyloo would take 6 rounds away from Spirit, but in the end, Spirit would win the game 13-6 and secure the 2-0 victory versus Tyloo.
Next up, we have Vitality versus MIBR. Powerhouse Vitality took on MIBR, which was surprisingly closer than what any would have considered. MIBR was ranked one of the lower teams in the Stage 2, but was able to go toe-to-toe, arguably one of the top teams in that very stage. In game number 1, MIBR would pick up Anubis to kick off the series, and their player Safi showed how comfortable he was on the map. He would drop 20 kills and only 10 deaths during game number 1, with the rest of the team all being positive. They showed their bomb site retakes are almost unbeatable during that very game. Going into game number 2 on Inferno, this was Vitality's picked map. They did not want a repeat from the first game and wanted to show why they are one of the better teams. Zaiwu would show why he should be a player to fear in Inferno, with dropping 19 kills with only 6 deaths for the entire game. He would hold all the top stats in the game with the most kills, damage per round, assists, AWP kills, and first kills. he would lead his team to a dominating victory 13-3 in game number 2. With such a dominating victory in game 2, Vitality looked to continue to game number 3, which took place on the last unbanned map Train. MIBR would battle as hard as they could during this, and even keeping the game dead even during the first half. However, Vitality would not let MIBR win this series and proceeded to dominate MIBR in the second half, winning the game 13-8 and the subsequent series 2-1.
Taking a look at Falcons versus Team Liquid. The Falcons would face off against Liquid in a very close and exciting series. Falcons came into the series as the favorites, but Team Liquid is not a team to write off. The first map, Inferno, which was picked by Team Liquid, was a battle. The game would go into overtime, both teams fighting for the victory, but Falcons would come out victorious 16-14. Going into game 2, the Falcons picked Dust as their map. Team Liquid battled back during this game to prove that they're not done yet and would win game 2 13-9. Their player Ultimate would go 22 kills and only 9 deaths to carry Liquid to this victory and into game 3 to determine who would win the series. Game 3 would take place on Ancient, which both teams are familiar with. Both teams did not want to lose this series, but in the end there could be only one winner. Falcons would come out on top after winning in overtime 16-13 to secure their victory.
Starting off round 2 was G2 versus Mongolz, which was an exciting series. G2 and Mongolz are both considered some of the top teams at this stage and did not disappoint during this very series. For game 1, the Mongolz chose Ancient as the first map of the series. They would start off the series strong with winning the first 6 rounds in a row, trying to make a statement to G2. However, G2 would not take this sitting down and would fight back, getting 5 rounds in a row themselves. Going into the second half, G2 showed their terrorist side strength with a dominating half. The Mongols struggled to find any footing whatsoever to fight against G2's aggressiveness and only were able to secure 2 rounds. G2 would come out on top with a 13-9 win for game 1. Game 2 then took place on Dust 2, which would be G2's pick, and what a close match it truly was. In both halves, we saw one team dominating the other as both teams excelled at the terrorist side on the map, but struggling when it comes down to the counter-terrorist side. In the first half, we saw G2 go up 10-2 with Monzi going on an insane 19 kills with a 5-death run. The Mongols were able to win an outstanding 9 rounds in a row, with Senzu getting 17 kills and only 7 deaths. They were able to push it into overtime where they just dominated G2 with winning 4 rounds in a row. The Mongols would win game 2, 16-12, and push the series into a map number 3. For the final game of the series, the 2 teams would face off on Mirage. Game 3 will be just as close as the previous 2 as both teams fight for the win. In the first half of the game, Senzu dropped 13 kills and a 7-round winning streak to put the team ahead. G2 fought back by making some of the rounds very close, but in the end, they were down by 4 in the first half, with the score being 4-8. With the switch of sides of the second half of the game, G2 came in hard with the winning first 6 rounds. Of the first to make it appear they are going to run away with the series. Bonzi would attempt to carry his team to victory with a 13 kill and 16 death scoreline, but Mongols would fight back yet. The Mongols would win this game 13-10 to secure the victory and the series to boot.
In the next series, we would have Mouz versus Falcon. Falcons would face off against Mouz in our next game, which saw a slight turn of events. Falcons were expected to be able to compete near the same level as Mouz and have some great games, but they seemed to struggle against Mouz. Game 1 on Train, which was picked by Falcons, the first half was close, with the game being tied 6-6. But the second half, Mouz just dominated the Falcons and won the game 13-7. Going into game 2 on Nuke, we saw a similar outcome. In the first half, the Falcons kept the score tied 6-6, but in the end, when the game moved to the second half, Mouz again dominated the Falcons. They would win the game 13-9, which makes everyone think, is there something going on with the Falcons team?
Next up, we have Navi versus Tyloo. Tyloo would again get a terrible matchup for their round 2, where they would now have to face up against the powerhouse that is Navi. Game 1 started on Tyloo's pick map, Inferno. This match would be a close one, with Tyloo showing some life in potentially taking down Navi. They were able to take the win first half 9-3. G, Mercury, and Attacker on Tyloo would all put on a good performance to win the first half. In the second half, however, Navi would fight on back, but it just wasn't enough. They would end up losing the first game to Tyloo 10-13. Tyloo looked like they might be able to take down the powerhouse Navi. Going into game 2 on Mirage, Navi's map choice, we saw a much different story. The very asleep giant appeared to have now woken up and wanted revenge against the loss they received in that very first map. In the first half, Navi would dominate Tyloo with winning 9 rounds and only giving away 3. It didn't get much better in the second half, where Navi again put out a performance-winning 4 rounds to Tyloo's measly 2. Tyloo would only get 15 kills total across their team in the second half. This would put Navi the victor of Game 2 with a 13-5 domination and a scoreline differential. We all hoped that Game 3 would be a closer match and Tyloo would be able to compete against Navi like they did in the first map, but Navi had other ideas when they again destroyed Tyloo in the first half, winning 9 rounds and only dropping 3. Going into the second half, we saw more and more life from Tyloo when they were able to win the first 2 rounds, but once Navi was able to buy, it was just simply over. Navi proceeded to win the next 4 rounds straight and won the game 13-5, which in turn won the series 2-1.
For the last series we'll be reviewing for round 2, let's take a look at Gamers Legions versus Pain. We got to see some close games between these two teams, and Pain Gaming looked like they woke up after their loss to G2 in the first round. Pain picked the first map in Game 1 and chose Nuke. This is a map that they are familiar with and have put some good performances on before, so it's expected to see some similar results, which we did. Pain would win the game 13-7 with all of Pain's players playing well and hitting double digits in kills. Going into Game 2, which would be on Inferno, Gamer Legion's pick, we would see a very close game that went into overtime. Gamer Legion would eventually win 16-13 with a strong overtime performance. With the series now tied 1-1, it would go to a Game 3 on Mirage. Pain was not happy with their loss in Game 2 and made it obvious with the beatdown that they did to Gamer Legion in Game number 3. Pain was not happy with their loss in Game number 2 and made it quite obvious on map number 3. Pain would only go to drop 2 rounds, winning the game 13-2 and winning the series 2-1. Gamer Legion would fight hard, but Pain just played the map well and outperformed Gamer Legions. Moving on to round 3, on Sunday we got to see some teams advance to the playoffs while others got eliminated. First series we'll take a look at is the powerhouse Spirit going against the uprising Mongolz. Both teams came into the series 2-0, but all they would need is one to progress to the playoffs. In the first game on Anubis, we got to see some good back and forth rounds in the first half. Mongolz started off winning the first 3 rounds, and then Spirit took over for the rest of the half. At the end of the first half, Spirit would be up 7-5 and switching to the terrorist side. They proceeded to dominate the rest of the game and only dropped 1 round in the second half. They would win Game 1 13-6 with Doink dropping 23 kills and only 12 deaths, as well as Shiro getting 21 kills and only 6 deaths. Going into the second game on Dust 2, there were some close matches between both teams showing that they want to go 3-0 in stage number 2. Spirit would have a great first half going up 8 rounds to 4 on the terrorist side, but Dust 2 is a heavy terrorist-sided map. So when the first half came to an end and rotating sides, we got to see the Mongolz start to claw back. They were able to bring the game back and tied 11-11, but Spirit would not accept overtime or defeat and proceed to win the next 2 rounds. Magic and Doink on Spirit would carry their team to victory, getting 46 kills between them alone. With Spirit winning this game 13-11, they secured their spot in the playoff bracket.
The second series, we'll take a quick look at Vitality versus Mouz. Both these teams were also undefeated, and whoever won the series would progress into the playoffs. Game 1 would take place on Inferno, where Vitality will show why they are one of the favorites of Stage 2. In the first half of the game, they would go up 9-3 on CT with a dominating performance. Apex would have 17 kills with only 4 deaths, with Zaiwu right behind him with 14 kills and 5 deaths. Mouz would only get 27 total kills in the first half. Mouz showed some signs of life in the second half, winning the first 3 rounds. However, Vitality was quickly able to turn things back around in their favor once the economy was stabilized. They would proceed to win the next 4 rounds and win the game 13-6. Going into Game 2, everyone hoped that Mouz would be able to stand up better against Vitality on Dust 2. In the beginning of the match, we did see Mouz performing much better and being up 4 rounds to 1, but Vitality came right on back and won 7 rounds in a row in the first half, putting them up 8-4 within that first half. Mouz did fight back though in the second half ever so slightly, but Vitality just showed that they were the better team and would win the game 13-7. ZywOo would go on an insane 26 kills and 8 death run, carrying his team to victory. With this win, Vitality will proceed to the playoffs.
In the mid-matches for round 3, we see Falcons go up against 3D Max. The Falcons were favored for this match, but with their loss to Mouz in round 2, many waited to see if they would be able to bounce back in the series. Game 1 would be on Inferno, where we would see a very close game. 3D Max would win this game 11-13, but it was not an easy victory with Falcons fighting hard each round. Game 2 would be on Ancients, where we would see the Falcons win 13-7 in a pretty good performance. Nico on Falcons would carry his team with 24 kills. Going into Game 3, everyone was excited to see another close game, but 3D Max had had enough. They would destroy the Falcons 13-2. The Falcons would only get 28 total kills in game number 3, where 3D Max, Brody, and Gravity would have 30 kills between them, and that's not even counting the 3 other players.
We finally move into the last couple of matches that happened in round number 3, which are the lower matches, in which the loser will be eliminated from the season. These teams would fight hard to keep themselves from being eliminated, but unfortunately, it's time for some of these teams to go home. The first match of the lower matches would be Gamer Legion versus Tyloo. Tyloo has had a real bad draw during Stage 2 of ESL Season 21, with them facing some very strong opponents in the league, and now are having to go against what is considered the best of the lower teams in the series. In game number 1, we would see Tyloo's map pick, Ancient. The first half of the series would be rough for Tyloo on the terrorist side, as Gamers Legion would go up 8-4, but Ancient is a counter-terrorist sided map, so the game was still anyone's. Tyloo would bring the game back in the second half on counter-terrorist side with a bunch of site retakes, putting it on game point. Gamer Legion, however, would win the last round and put it into overtime. Tyloo would start overtime strong with winning the first 3 rounds on counter-terrorists, but Gamers Legion would turn things around and win the next 7 rounds straight in overtime to secure victory in a 19-15 game number 1. Moving into game number 2 of the series, this time on Inferno, which was Gamers Legion's pick, the match would go on forever. At least it's what it felt like. Tyloo did not want to get eliminated and put up a strong battle, which put this game into overtime, just like the first game. This one, however, would go an insane 42 rounds before victory would be determined. Gamers Legion would come out on top, eventually winning the match 22-20 with a hard-fought battle to stay in the series. Unfortunately, Tyloo would be eliminated with this loss and would be the first team sent home in the season.
The last match to happen this weekend would be Furia versus MIBR. Both these teams from Brazil would have to battle it out to see who stays and who goes. Game 1 would take place on Anubis, MIBR's map of choice. Furia would come into the game swinging with a 6-round win streak on the T side, but MIBR was able to fight back with some rounds, ending the half 8-4. In the second half, MIBR showed some sign of life with small round wins to tie up the game, but Furia would not allow MIBR to gain a foothold. They would come back to beat MIBR in Game 1 with a 13-9 victory. MIBR struggled to show some footing during this match, and there were concerns if they would be able to stand tall in the next game. Map 2 would take place on Mirage, which Furia has shown to be a strong map for them. However, MIBR would give Furia a run for their money, as they did not want to be eliminated. The first half would end in a tie 6-6. In the second half, it appeared that MIBR might run off with the game, winning the first 4 rounds. It appeared that MIBR might run off with the game, winning the first 4 rounds straight, but Furia would not allow them to take control. They would come back to make Game 2 go into overtime. Overtime would go back and forth between the teams, as neither of them were able to overcome one another. MIBR would start winning a few more rounds as the trades kept going, and would come out on top, winning the game 19-17. The series, tied 1-1, could go either way, as both teams seemed to be awake and ready to fight for their survival in the season. Map 3 would take place on Inferno, where it appeared MIBR might have to use all their energy in the last game. We all hoped for another crazy match like map number 2, but Furia came out swinging and MIBR looked tired. Furia would destroy MIBR in a 13-1 map, with MIBR only getting 26 kills in the entire match. To put that into perspective, the top 2 players on Furia had 28 kills between them alone. With a dominating victory, Furia would stay holding on to the season, with MIBR being eliminated and sent home. That's it for the matches that happened over the weekend. It's unfortunate to see Tyloo and MIBR being eliminated at this stage, but it's gotta happen. It was expected for Spirit and Vitality to lock in their positions for the playoffs, so that's no surprise. Now let's take a look at the next upcoming matches.
Mongolz are going to be taking on 3D Max. Mouz taking on Team Liquid. G2 goes up against Navi. Saw will be going up against Gamers Legion. Pain will be going up against Eternal Fire. And then Falcons will be taking on Furia. So still a lot of good matches to be happening here for the Counter-Strike ESL Pro League Season 21. And that's all we got for today's episode on this very wonderful Monday. Hope you all enjoyed this past weekend's competition and look forward to this upcoming weekend. Again, we have plenty more tournaments on the horizon, so make sure you tune in to this very channel for the episode that's going to be coming out on Thursday to be in the know of what's in store for this weekend. On behalf of all involved, y'all stay safe, and we'll see you on Thursday.